The Boy Sadler, Ralph, by Chris Sadler. How you diddling? I've got to tell you about Ralph. You know Ralph, dangerous as dead. Despite these days of confusing family relationships, he's still what you'd call my father-in-law. He was a revelation from the start, upbeat and friendly and good to be around, with a great honking laugh like a seal playing with a megaphone. Wonderful fella. Nosy too, loves people, always wants to know what's going on. He's got a regular table at the cafe at the garden centre in Upper Gifflin, where he meets his cronies every day and they put the world to rights over an overpriced cappuccino and a bacon roll. If he spies anyone he knows walking past the window, and he knows everyone, he'll hoot a welcome before you're even in the door. As everyone says, with a laugh, you'll always hear Ralph before you see him. Got a load of tales too, all true, like the one about his mate Harrison years ago, who discovered homemade fiberglass. That's right, fiberglass you make at home. Bright yellow it was. This was in the days before everything was made of plastic. Even iPhones were Bakelite in them days. Anyway, Ralph's mate Harrison decided to experiment with this newfound stuff and decided he wanted to build a plane in his shed. After a couple of months of melting, smearing and moulding, he came up with a small, single-winged, crustular monstrosity which he claimed would be dancing in the clouds before sundown. He called it the Spirit of St. Mouy. A bit of a wag. Father-in-law Ralph was nothing if not an optimist, so he got involved too. Being a practical man, he was the first to point out that this plan was foolhardy at best and life-threatening at worst. But with typical kindness, he offered to help anyway. Also, as a practical man, he pointed out that the rough-built aircraft, A, looked like it had been coagulated rather than built, B, was an off-putting shade of yellow, like out-of-date custard, and C, unlikely to get off the ground due to its weight, shape and general unairworthiness. But mostly because it lacked an engine. I've thought of that, said Harrison. I decided halfway through I'd make a glider. A glider, said Ralph. Yes, said Harrison, a glider. Supporting the statement by wafting his hand in a smooth lateral motion, expressing how he envisaged this treasured creation moving as it glided effortlessly through the air. Ralph pursed his lips, buried a burning doubt, crossed his arms and tried to maintain a stoically supportive expression. Come on, Ralph, said Harrison, we've got to try her out. So they both lifted and strapped the ungainly contraption to the roof rack of his Austin Maxi. Where are we going, said Ralph. Up the Holt Gifflin Road. That's fairly straight. We'll try her out there, said Harrison. But that's a public road, said Ralph. It'll be fine, said Harrison. I'll take the Maxi. You take the Norton. The what, said Ralph. The Norton, said Harrison. The motorbike, said Ralph. Yes, said Harrison, playing with a rope. We're going to need something to tow her up into the air. Ralph paused, had a little think, smelt adventure in the air, so enthusiastically agreed. Once they'd got up to the Holt Gifflin Road, they set everything up ready for the test run. Harrison straddled the Norton, clamped on his helmet, checked both ways for traffic, then revved up the beast. Ralph, sensibly deciding to take a watching brief, took 2 steps back to safely observe proceedings from behind a 5-bar gate. Harrison, his teeth gritted, engaged the clutch and set off at pace towards Holt in a roar of engine noise and smoke. The rope between him and the glider snapped taut, and the fiberglass hulk started to hurtle surprisingly quickly along the tarmac. Ralph watched open-mouthed as the yellow blur slid by. Now, it would be indiscreet to say exactly what happened next, but suffice it to say, after 30 extraordinary and very noisy seconds, the world, or the immediate environment, suddenly looked very different. At the side of the road, an entire hedgerow had been flattened and a flock of until recently incarcerated sheep were now swarming across the thoroughfare, sniffing suspiciously at mustard-coloured pieces of wreckage. The Norton was upended in a ditch, with the front wheels spinning loosely, a la Wile E. Coyote, and the air was filled with the smell of scorched plastic. A snapped tow rope lay sadly on the carriageway. Fortunately, Harrison appeared unhurt. He lifted his smudged face over the lip of a nearby ditch, raised a nettle-covered arm in triumph, and hooted like a maniac. "We did it!" he shouted. "Not quite," said Ralph. "We nearly did it!" shouted Harrison happily. Ralph helped him out of the ditch. They were both laughing so hard they fell over again. "I bet the Wright brothers are panicking," he said between gasps, as they lay on the verge surveying the mangled mess. To cut a long story short, a passing farmer Ralph knew helped them clear up the wreckage before a Norfolk Roswell rumour could start. Between them and the farmer's dog, they organised the sheep back into the field, propped the hedge up again, and took the damaged bike back to Gifflin on the farmer's trailer. All was well. The only thing left was the story itself, which enjoyed a life of its own as it spread through the pubs of the parish, through various wide-eyed and whispered retellings over the next fortnight. But most importantly, everyone was safe, and all was well. Some days later, Ralph asked Harrison, "You going to try again?" "No," said Harrison, smiling. "Flying's for the birds. I've got a better idea." "What's that?" said Ralph. Harrison widened his usual toothless grin and pointed at his mouth. "What?" said Ralph. Harrison pointed again. "I don't know. What?" said Ralph. "Has anyone thought of fiberglass false teeth?" said Harrison. They laughed and snapped each other on the back. And that was the legend, the true legend, of Harrison and the fiberglass glider. And he did go on to make them teeth. Happy days. There's just one other little thing to say. R.I.P. JRC. Much loved, much missed. Ciao, John. One day I'll tell you about the day he captured the escaped ostrich. Yeah, really. For the time being, ciao altogether.